Revelation chapter 6 is where we're going to be tonight. And we're going to look at some verses. Let me just read these verses to you if I can, and then let me just read these verses, and I'll say some things, and we'll get started. Look at verse number 3. Verse number 3. It says this: "And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, 'Come and see.' And there went out another horse that was red, and the power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another, and there was given unto them a great sword. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, 'Come and see.' And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, 'A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And to see thou hurt not the oil, and see that thou hurt not the oil and the wine.' And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the fourth beast say, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto him that over a fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth." Now, these verses I read to you are very much very disconcerting verses. They are very telling of the time in which we're studying here. Now, if you've been around on Sunday nights for any amount of time, you'll know that not too long back we got ourselves in a series on Sunday night of messages that I've called "Pastor, I've got a question." And what we're doing was you ask questions, and I've done my best to try to answer those questions. Well, several weeks ago, we took several weeks on Sunday night off. We got involved in a series of questions, a little mini series around the book of Revelation. And the reason why is because many of you had questions regarding the book of Revelation. And I understand why. Man, listen, of all the books that we have in our Bible, the book of the Revelation is really the only future book we have in our Bible. Now, we know Daniel mentions a lot about prophecy, and then you get over in other parts of the Bible, there may be a verse or two about what the things to come. But the outside, once you get to Revelation chapter number 4, from chapter 4 to chapter 21, all of those verses, so 17 chapters, they deal directly with what is to come. And I understand why that intrigues most of us. Listen, when we think about what's going to happen down the road, man, it causes a lot of us to be intrigued by that. And I understand that. But what we're trying to do is to do an airplane overview of the book of Revelation. Now, hopefully you understand what I mean by that. I don't know how many of you have ever had the chance to fly, but I remember several times I have had a chance to fly. Maybe when I was flying to California, and we would fly over those Midwest states, and you would look down, and you would see these what looked to me very tiny farms, but if you really understood, these gigantic farms. I mean, they had a lot of crops in them and a lot of things going on, but we were looking way up high, way down low, and we just kind of got a glimpse at these farms. Well, that's what we're going to do, hopefully, with the book of Revelation. I'm not going to get into a very in-depth and detailed study of every verse and every chapter. What I hope to do is kind of just take the book of Revelation and just give us an overview of what's happening here in the book of Revelation. But I will say again before I get too involved, that the book of the Revelation should not be a book that entertains you and I. You know, I know many people who have made Christian people, and I think they had good intentions, but they made a living off of entertaining people with the book of Revelation. I mean, there's movies, and there's books, and there's podcasts, and there's so many things people have taken from this book, and they have entertained the Christian masses with this book of Revelation. But can I just remind you, the book of the Revelation is not a book that should entertain you and I. It's a book that should engage you and I. I think it's okay to study it. I think it's okay to understand it. But I think what it should do when we understand what's happening here is it ought to engage us in the business of what the church has been called to do. Can I remind you, the church has never been called to sit down and study prophecy. The church has never been charged to sit down and try to parse out all the unknown details of these unknown times. What the church has been charged to do is to take the message of the gospel and go into a lost and dying world and preach the gospel to people and see those people saved. So if you and I can use the book of the Revelation and it help engage us in the business of the church, I think it's a great thing, and I think we ought to be involved in it. And that's what I hope to do with this series around this book. Now, if you remember, several weeks ago, we got to this chapter 6, and we begin to break open the seals of the seven-sealed book. In chapter 5, we realize that after John makes it to heaven, and John gets to heaven, that there's a book brought forth. And they begin to cry out, who is worthy to open the book? And they find out that they all through heaven, the angels were not worthy, the prophets were not worthy, the elders sitting around the throne were not worthy, but there was one worthy in heaven to open the book, and that was the only begotten, the Son of God, the Lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world. And so Jesus steps in, and He begins to open the seals of the book. And in the opening of the seals of the book, a time in Revelation called the time of the tribulation will begin. And in the tribulation period is a period of 7 years. 7 years. Now, let me remind you, for those who may not know who you're listening to, I'm what's called a pre-millennial rapture individual. I'm a pre-tribulational rapture preacher. So what that means is this. It's back there in chapter 4, verse 1, where John said, where God looks down and tells John to come up hither. That's a picture of the church leaving this earth before the tribulation begins. But once the church leaves out of here, a 7-year period will begin, called the time of the tribulation. And in each one of these seals that are opening, we see some of the events that will take place during the time of the tribulation. So a few weeks ago, we looked at this first seal, and we saw this first seal open, and in that opening of the first seal, we saw one of these horses come forth, and there was a rider on this horse. And the Bible said in verse number 2 that he had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. So we have this white horse, and there's a rider on him. And we tried to did our best to understand exactly who this individual was who steps out at the beginning of the tribulation period in this opening of this seal. We try to study his identity, his authority, and his brevity. And we find that to know this individual is to know him as what we would call the Antichrist. He is the one who is going to step on the scene during this 7-year period of time and do his best to usher forth a one world government, a one world religion, and do his best to drive this time of chaos, this time of turmoil, into a time in which the devil begins to play havoc on this earth. But I'll just remind you, he's only there for a short period of time. He's only there, his time is very brief. But we find in the first sealing that in that moment, the Antichrist steps forward onto the scene. Well, after the first seal is opened up, then we have these, we're going to look tonight at these other 3 seals that open up, and we're going to kind of look at them together because they kind of work themselves together. And let me just say a few things, and then we'll be done. Let me talk with you first of all about what I would call the time of these seals. The time of these seals. You know, we just read from verse 3 down to verse 8 that these 3 seals begin to open up. But I think it's important for you and I to understand the time in which these 3 seals take place. Because if we're not careful, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that these happen almost like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, almost in sequential order. But we also have to understand that chapter 6 is not a by day happening. It is an overview itself of all that's going to happen in the time of the revelation, in the time of the tribulation. So to understand these 3 seals, we've got to understand that what's mentioned in these 3 things, with these 3 riders who come forth, they are not going to just happen on any given date. They're going to happen over the period of the tribulation. So let's understand the time. Okay? But let's also now understand the tragedy of these three seals. Because we find in these three seals the things that are getting ready to happen on this earth. Now, none of them are unknown to this world. But none of these things have happened on the scale that they're going to happen during the time of the tribulation. You know, look at verse number 3, and let's read about. Let's study this first seal, the second seal. Excuse me. It says this: "And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, 'Come and see.' And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword." So in this moment, after the Antichrist steps forward, the second great thing that's going to happen during the tribulation period, as this rider on this red horse comes forward, is the world is going to be plunged into unbelievable war and chaos. Now let's just imagine, if we can, let's put our imagination hats on for a moment, and let's just begin to understand what's happening during this time. In the blink of an eye, in a moment, millions of people have left this earth with no trace. I mean, all they left behind was the clothes they were wearing, the vehicle they were driving. All they left behind was their glasses they were wearing. I mean, listen, they're nowhere to be found. I mean, there's all of a sudden a great amount of chaos in the fact that the world has now missing millions of people. But now what begins to happen is the world begins to plunge itself into war as people begin to vie for power. I mean, the Bible talks about the wars that are going to come on Israel during that day. I mean, yeah, the Bible in Revelation and over there in Daniel, it talks about the kings of the north who are going to come down and go to war against Israel. Israel will be plunged into the war. Not only that, but now all across the world, as people begin to try to figure out how they're going to live and how they're going to survive as the economies collapse and as jobs are gone. Can I tell you, the whole world is going to be plunged into nothing but murder and death and war and chaos at an unprecedented level. And you say, "Brother Jonathan, do you not watch the news?" Well, of course I watch the news. I was just like you. What's going on in our world right now? They talk about things like war that's going on. I mean, right now, listen, we know this, but Israel itself, they are a lone country surrounded by nothing but enemies. Right now, they're fighting against Hezbollah and all that stuff. But can I tell you, I mean, Russia's at war with Ukraine still, so we understand. Listen, our world feels like even right now it's on the brink of war. But not to this level. I mean, listen, I'm like you, man. Listen, somebody said the other day, it's crazy to me, but like, man, just the other day, down there at Haynes Mall, you can't go to Haynes Mall now and walk around and enjoy your time and shop and spend all your money because you're afraid somebody's going to come in there and start shooting around. I mean, it's crazy in this world. I mean, I think it's in California right now that if you steal less than $10,000, they won't prosecute you for anything. So people who are too lazy to go get a job, they'll just walk in the stores and just steal everything that they want and know they're going to get. I can tell you, it's a crazy world we live in. It's an unsafe world, but can I tell you, not to the level that it will be. Listen, I understand. I'm like you. I think, man, it's getting dark. But friend, our world's never known a darkness like this darkness. Can I tell you why? Because in this moment, the one thing that has held at bay the wickedness of this world will be gone. Well, what is it? The church and the Spirit of God. Can I tell you, listen, I know the world may hate who we are, and I know the world may hate what we stand for, but can I just tell you, the one thing that stands between the darkness and the chaos and the wickedness of this world taking over and there being a little modicum of some peace is the fact that there still remains a church that will stand up and try to shine forth the glorious light of the gospel. Hey, the Spirit of God that still works in the heart of men to convict men. Hey, can I tell you, listen, when all that's out of here, friend, hey, it's anti-bar the door. Hey, grab your gun. It's every man for himself. Can I tell you, it's going to be unbelievable. This red horse, the tragedy. But can I tell you, it all works together. So you have the tragedy of war, but then you see the tragedy of this next horse. Look what it says. And when he had opened the third seal, verse number 5, and I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Can I tell you what comes after war? Famine. See, this picture of this third horse, this black horse, is actually a picture of the famine that will ensue in our nation. I mean, across the whole world. Now, listen, if we're not careful, we'll read this and think, man, only a little bit of wheat for a penny, a little bit of barley for a penny. Hold on, friend. A penny was at 1 day's wage. A measure of barley, or 3 measures, of wheat for a penny. Listen, if I understand my study correctly, a measure of barley was good enough to make a loaf of bread for an average family in that day. So 1 day's wage would buy you enough bread for just a few sandwiches. A whole day. Can I tell you what's going on there? Man, it's inflation and famine on a scale that this world has never seen before. Now listen, some of you are old enough to remember things like gas lines. Man, it wasn't too long ago. Man, we were at a senior trip up at Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And all of a sudden, we got word that the gas lines were going to be the East Coast was going to run out of gas. I mean, the lines of people who lined up just to get gas in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, man, it was nerve-wracking. But some of y'all remember those days. That wasn't too long ago. Man, listen, we live in a time right now. I understand, man, the federal government tells us inflation's under control, but some of y'all go to the grocery store like I do. It don't feel under control to me. Listen, I mean, you can tell. It takes a lot to feed a guy like me. Pray for my wife. Listen, but listen, we talk about how bad it is now, and it ain't great, and I get it. But friend, it ain't that bad. Because after war, the one reality of any country that is ravaged by war is the fact that at the end of that war, the thing they're going to experience after that is they're going to experience a famine. Because the country is destroyed, because the people who would normally work in the fields to provide the food, they're injured because of the war, or they're dead. Hey, can I tell you? But listen, the whole world, famine on a worldwide scale, tragedy on a worldwide scale. Friend, after this war, and then all of a sudden there comes famine, and then lastly this fourth seal. What happens after all that? Death. Verse number 7, verse number 8 tells us this. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And his name that sat on him was Death. And hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with all the beasts of the earth. Now, if I read that correctly, and I think I did, that during the tragedy of this tribulation, 1/4 of the earth is going to die in the tragedy of the tribulation. 25%. 1 out of 4. I mean, if we did the math in here right now, I'm going to average this out. It looks to me like that would be just about that whole side over there would lose their life during this period of time. And that doesn't count the millions of people who've already left out of here in the rapture. This is those who are left behind. What can I tell you? You read about wars in some areas where the death toll is so high that people don't even get individual graves. They just have to dig these big vast graves and bury everybody together like they can. Man, I don't know about you, but I like history. I like reading about history. But I love the Civil War. It's probably one of my favorite times in history to read about. But I love World War II. I love that time in history. And I've seen pictures just like you have of mass graves of people where they were dug because so many people died at one time. But friend, we've never seen it on that scale before. I mean, 1/4 of the earth gone, boom, dead. I mean, the graveyards can't hold all that. Funeral homes can't deal with all that. Listen, it's just going to be nothing but murder and tragedy and death. That's why in the book of Revelation it says something like this, that the people will be so distraught that they'll cry for the mountains to fall on them, and yet they won't die. Can I tell you, it's chaos on steroids. It's tragedy at a level 11. It's unbelievable this time. So the time, the tragedy. But let me just bring it all down to here. Let's talk about the truth for a moment. Now I'll read all that, and here's where I'm going to land the plane. I'm going to be real quick here. I read all that, and here's what I know. But as I read these verses, and I read about war, and I read about famine, and I read about death, and I read about inflation and all that stuff. I read about that in today's newspaper. I mean, listen, I don't know about you, but man, my social media feeds are full with all this clickbait of this, look at this and look at this. I mean, that stuff's going on now. And can I tell you, it's happening in places that are central, that are central to the Bible. You know, the center of the world, biblically speaking, is not Washington, D.C. The center of the world, biblically speaking, is not New York City. The center of the world, biblically speaking, is Jerusalem. And man, listen, flip on your TV. Listen, not only does it seem like all of Israel's enemies are against her and fired up to go to war with her. Russia is trying to become a power again. America is diminishing as a world power. And can I tell you something? Not only that, I see, and I don't know if you see it, that America is slowly turning its back on the great ally we have been to Israel. And I still kind of believe where it says, where God told Abraham, I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee. You say, Brother John, what does all that mean to you? Well, I don't know what it means. But I do know this. It could mean that we're getting ready to get out of here. I mean, it could mean we're here for another 1,000, 2,000 years. I don't know. But it seems like to me that what I'm reading in my Bible is lining up really easy with what I find on my news feeds every day. And if that's the case, then again, let me just say it like this. You have loved ones, and I have loved ones who will endure this. You have neighbors, and I have neighbors who will go through this. You have coworkers, and I have coworkers who this is their future. There are strangers who you meet every day who are going to go through this. And can I tell you, listen, I'm going to, can you flip with me to the book of Ephesians? I don't know if you've been there any time today. Go with me to the book of Ephesians. I'm going to share this verse with you tonight, and I'll go somewhere different next Sunday morning if we're still here. So again, the book of Ephesians, these verses are all about your walk, right? Well, look with me. In verse number 14, it says this, wherefore he saith, awake, thou that sleepeth, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. Can I tell you what Revelation ought to do for you and me? It ought to wake us up. It ought to just, listen, at some point in time, we ought to just recognize what's going on, and it ought to just wake us up. Can I just be honest with you? Listen, too many of us, man, we get mad at our kids because they love that snooze button, man. Listen, they hit that snooze button, and then they hit that snooze button, and then they hit that snooze button, or if they got a phone now, they don't hit snooze button on the phone. They just have an alarm at 6:05. And 6:06 and 6:07 and 6:08. They got 47 alarms, right? Because they're going to wake up on the 46th alarm. That's how they work. And we get so mad at them. But can I tell you something? How about God's people? We look around, and I didn't hear anybody disagree with me. We know it's dark outside. We know it's dangerous outside. We know that time is coming down to the end, and we know that what's going to happen is nothing but tragedy and nothing but heartache and nothing but sorrow. And can I tell you something? And we know that there are people who we love. Hey, there's loved ones you're going to sit down with in a few months at Christmas time, and they're lost as a ball in high weeds. There's people you're going to go see tomorrow on your job site, and they're lost. Hey, there's people in your neighborhood that you drive past every Sunday and every Wednesday, and you wave at them, but you never told them about Jesus. Hey, and there's people who you meet every day. You see them at gas stations and drive-thrus and walking down hey, we see lost people everywhere. And that's their future. And we'll sit in a church house and we'll say, boy, it sure is bad out there. Man, I just wish the Lord would come back. Sure is getting dark, isn't it? And we don't love people enough. We don't love people who are going to endure the tribulation period enough to just say, hey, can I just tell you about Jesus? Can I give you this tract? Can I help you? Listen, we're like a doctor who has found a cure for cancer. And we've got the cure. And we know if the whole world knew what we had, it'd change the whole world. But we take that cure and we put it in our pocket. And we go around real happy because we got the cure. But we won't tell anybody else about the cure. Can I tell you something? Listen to me. I'm not going to re-preach this message, but man, can I tell you, the Lord helped me on Tuesday, and I hope it sticks with me, man. Y'all pray for me. But listen, I'll listen to a preacher on Tuesday. It's his thought, Kenny Baldwin. I won't borrow it, but if you like it, it's my thought. It's fine. He was talking about how over there in Romans that Paul was getting ready to go to Rome. And Rome was the center of the known universe with all their culture, with all their power, with all their prestige. And here this little Jewish man is. And he wants to come to Rome so much. But the Roman people don't love Jewish people. They look down on them. They're this little unknown place down there. And the Rome who had all their pagan gods and had all their belief in their pagan gods. Hey, they heard down there in Rome, in Jerusalem, they had this new message about this man whose name was Jesus. And this little upstart faction was causing a problem. But they didn't want to hear that message. But I like what Paul said. He said this, listen, I've got something you need. I can't wait to come where you're at because I've got the gospel and I know the power of the gospel. I know what it'll do. He said, I'm not ashamed of it. I want to bring it where you're at. And yet here we sit as a church in the modern day. And can I tell you, we still got the same gospel. It's still the same message that'll change somebody's life. It's still the same work that'll take care of what this world needs more than anything. Hey, and we've got it, and we're ashamed of it. We've got it, and we won't share it with nobody. We've got it, and we're afraid we're going to offend people. We've got it, and we're just happy that I'm saved, my wife's saved, my kids are saved, and I don't care if the whole world dies and goes to hell. At least my four are okay. Hey, we've come to the place where we have no desire to share the gospel with anybody. But yet their future is nothing but tragedy. Their future is nothing but death and war and heartache and murder. Hey, that's what they're waiting. That's what's waiting on them. Why in the world? Why do I have the right? Why do you have the right to not share the gospel? Can I ask you a question? Where would you be if that preacher who was preaching the day you got saved, what if he just decided he's going to take a day off? Called in sick. I'm out here on visitation. My boat's named Visitation. I'm on visitation. You can't come to church today. Where would you be? Man, where would I be? Where would I be if that night that guy who's come to my house to knock on my door decided it was too cold? It was December. It was cold. I don't feel like going. Listen, none of us had the right to hear the gospel. It was the grace of God we got to hear it. So why do we rob people of the grace that you got? Church, I'm telling you, this is my heart. I'm bearing my heart to you. We've got to, we, including me, we've got to get serious about this thing. Hey, if the Lord comes back 1,000 years from now, and all we've done is work as hard as we can to see as many people saved, then great. We've done our job. But if the Lord comes back next week and we haven't done anything to share the gospel with anybody, then shame on us. Shame on us. Because the truth is, their future is much bleaker than my future. Their future is full of awful lot of tears. And I get to go to heaven by the grace of God. I wasn't doing God no favors when He saved me. He was doing me a great service. So why in the world do I have the right to sit down and sit back and shut up about the great news of the gospel? I don't. And you don't either. The best thing we can do is get engaged in the business of seeing people saved. Can I challenge you? Let me just challenge you. Why don't you do this with me? Why don't you grab just 7? Grab 7 tracts. Ricky, can you help me get some of those tracts out there? You grab 7. I don't care which one it is. You grab 7. And you commit with me. I'll do it too. And in the next 7 days, I'm going to hand one of these out every day. Just one. And if we did that tonight, if we all did that, that's well over. I don't do math very well. Andrew, you want to do the math for me? He said, no! I don't know. There's 50 people here. That's 7 times 5. That's 3. That's 350 people. 350 people who get to hear the gospel. Who knows what God might do with that? Because the truth is, what's waiting on them is a tragedy. But they don't have to go. But we're the only plan God's got. There ain't no plan B for Him. Now He could let the rocks cry out. I mean, He could turn Pilot Mountain into a PA system that would blast the good news of the gospel all across this valley. But He ain't going to do that. You're His vehicle. You're His voice. You're His vessel. So I think we ought to get busy with it. Let's pray.